free from human-caused disasters, capable of meeting material needs without harming people or the planet, learning to meet social needs through systems that nurture the best in us. And our mission is to safeguard people, communities, lands, living systems from impeding climate disasters whilst simultaneously supporting in the discovery and scaling of climate crisis solutions. And in doing all this, our goals are majorly three, although we have a lot of things that we aspire to achieve. But one of them is to enhance the effectiveness and impact of the network of passionate planetary healers and change makers committed to EVN's vision and mission. And another goal is to critically share knowledge to realize EVN's mission through dialogue, shared inquiry, joint action with individuals and partner organizations. The other goal is also to inspire and unite communities to effectively address the devastating impacts of climate change, extinction cascades, society breakdowns, and system failures. So those are some of the goals that we look forward to achieve. And we invite all EVN members to come through because we can't do it alone as coordinators. We need to work with you, share responsibility on different committees, and also we appreciate all your time. So that is what we stand for, and that is EVN for you. We appreciate your time. So at this moment, in relation to agenda, I would love to invite Nancy to introduce Della. And before I proceed, I would love to let you know that Gertrude will be one of our lead moderators. I don't know whether she's in position to do so, but she's supposed to be the lead moderator in this whole presentation. So, Nancy, you are welcome. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Robert. And I am so happy to welcome you, Percy. This is our first opportunity to hear what you have to say. I met you about a year ago now and had the real pleasure of working with Della for a number of months and was really impressed with his knowledge about the topic that he researches, nutrition, nutritional benefits of indigenous foods, and the much larger sets of questions about how those foods can be reclaimed, how we can plant them, go back to traditional ways of food preparation, concerns for how agribusiness is beginning to take over in Africa, and people's needs for food. There's a great deal of hunger going on. That's also a topic we'll be addressing next month when Elizabeth, whom you just heard, and her co-director, Peter Otiende from Kenya, will be talking about the Permagardens Foundation. But the foundation for that is the scientific understanding that Della is bringing to us. He has just completed, just a week or so ago, he chaired a Pan-African conference with 600 attendees and major speakers from all over the world on these topics, and had the opportunity to explore the food questions, the questions of the agroecology that can support the growing of or the reclaiming of indigenous foods, and dealing also with some of the political questions and economic questions that are driving these trends. So, Percy, as I have known you with your English name, and Della, I am so delighted that you were able to make time to be with us today and that you are joining the Equatorial Voices Network. I really value your leadership and your companionship. Welcome. I'm most interested to hear what you have to say.
Thank you so much, Nancy, for the very, very kind words. For a moment, I wasn't sure. I was listening to descriptions about myself. I had to pinch myself to be sure I I was the one who was being described, but I really appreciate the kind words, and I want to thank you for welcoming me to this forum. I have only been here a few minutes, and I already feel very much at home, and I want to appreciate you, Robert, and all the leaders on the team for making that possible. I'm very convinced that great things actually do start small. What has always worked has been consistency and true commitment. And I'm proud to notice that there's a lot of this happening in the Equatorial Voices team. Thank you for inviting me. I will be sharing my screen shortly. Let me do that immediately. 1 minute. There are quite a few things on my computer, but let me clear them quickly and share my screen. Great. There we go. Oh, come on. Come on. Yeah, there you go. Share. There you are. All right. Please, can you see my screen now?
Very well, thank you. Yes, beautiful, Della.
Great. So I was invited to speak about some of the works that I've been doing over the last few years. And one of the things that I do as a nutritionist and dietitian here in Ghana has been to try and train the citizenry and the patients that I meet on a daily basis on how to use the foods within their environment to manage their health conditions on the one hand, and to prevent them from getting ill in the first place. And so I've always had to look out for foods within the environment of my clients and my patients. And that led to a desire to work on indigenous foods, because then food has become more and more expensive. People have had to spend more. People are having to spend more to get less food. In fact, the last time we did a check on the cost of a healthy diet using one of the models from the University of Tufts in the US, a healthy diet in Ghana is about $3 to $4. In fact, actually 4.5, $4.50. And that translates to more than 80 cedis per person in Ghana, which is pretty much more than the average person's minimum wage per day. So which means that, hello, can you hear me?
Yes, yes, we are hearing you. I accidentally
Great.
let that noise in. I'll go off sound now.
Oh, sorry about that. So clearly there is food is getting more and more expensive. There is economics of food. Currently a US dollar changes at about 16 cedis in Ghana. And so which means that the more the cedi loses its value against a dollar, the more expensive food becomes. And over 3 million, I need to verify that value, but I mean, from over 3 million people are under the poverty line of $1 per day. So which means that a lot of people who come to us really need to have access to good and healthy food, nutritious food, but these foods must come from cheaper and less expensive sources. And that is what brings me to this very important conversation that I have been invited to speak to you about. And so my work over the time has been to find ways to make healthy meals cheaper and affordable, and readily available to people within the space that I work in. And so that brings us to the conversation of indigenous foods that are within the traditional setting, and how to use that to ensure that people are food secure, that is having adequate food to eat, adequate, safe, and healthy food to eat at all times throughout the year, and to ensure that that will improve their nutrition security. Now, when I prepared a presentation about a week or two ago, I sought to ask about all of these things. But I'm looking at this number of slides and I'm thinking that I may skip some, but in the discussions, I'm sure it will come up and we can have these conversations. So my introductory comments is that presently in many cosmopolitan parts of Ghana or Africa, these are the major meals that people are consuming now. And most of them are rice-based dishes. And some of which, to some extent, are borrowed. They are not actually indigenous. But then, for some good reasons, the boiled foods that come with the stews or soups, and then the fish soups that goes with something that we call fufu. I'll show you pictures of that or pounded tubers or pounded grains tend to have lived beyond, transcended into the modern way of life. So these are basically the foods that many Ghanaians will eat on a daily basis. And that may apply to many parts of Africa. Now, so I want to just make a few comments or definitions. And the facts are that food security continues to be an issue in Africa. Many communities continue to have inadequate food, and these foods are tending to be culturally inappropriate, because then in many places the food aids are being sent to them, and these foods come in forms that are not exactly culturally acceptable. But then between starvation and having to eat something, people are forced to eat these options that are brought to them. Meanwhile, if we are able to preserve the foods within their natural environment or habitat, we may be able to provide these culturally acceptable foods. So food security is really a problem in Africa, which we all understand. And to make matters worse, on the one hand, it's meant to be a solution or efforts to solve the problem of food security and to increase food production. So we are using what we call modern agricultural technologies. We are doing monocropping. We are doing large-scale farmings. We are doing plantations. And we are trying to do some form of agro-pollination or agro-technology. Yes, we are doing some form of technology just to ensure that food production goes up. But the downside to most of these things are that they are primarily top-down. In other words, it is from what I would generally call the north, and then these are the way it's done up north, or the north of the global north, and this is how you should replicate it. Now we do know that terrains are different for various reasons, and in each terrain you may not necessarily have to. What works in one jurisdiction may not necessarily work in the terrains, particularly in Africa. But then most agricultural practices and modern practices are now mostly top-down. They are just replicating what is done elsewhere. And we do know, for example, for monocropping, that it has effects on the soil, affecting biodiversity. And that actually is at the expense of traditional food systems. In other words, we are sacrificing or axing away the traditional indigenous forms of growing and keeping sustainable foods away, and throwing that away into the dustbin, and adopting the mechanized, or if you like, the what we are calling in quotation marks modern agricultural practices that, yes, does increase yield, but does not necessarily promote the biodiversity and sustainable biosystems in Africa. And so, yes, but in recent time, I am happy to note that at least as far back as 2013, and even earlier, researchers in Africa are beginning to be more interested in reviving and promoting indigenous foods, and that's where my motivation comes from, and how we can use these indigenous foods to increase or to solve our own indigenous food insecurity situation in Africa. Now, again, these indigenous foods are becoming more and more neglected because we are throwing them away. I'm not sure. There's a book in Africa we used to read titled Animal Farm by George Orwell, and the things about the pigs, the farm managed to throw away the rule of the farmer, and then the pigs were now from the new government, and there were these pigs who were running, and they had a set of rules for how animals should live. I'm not sure if you are familiar with that book, but it's a very wonderful piece of literature. But the crust of the point I want to make with this is that, so we are basically making, or the conversations has been around underutilizing the species that are indigenous to the African continent, and the indigenous, food cuisines and meals are now mostly relegated to the background. And in some cultures now, modern society, in fact, the Gen Zs, as we would want to refer to them now, may not even know of the existence of several indigenous meals and foods, because then what they get used to are what they see on social media and TV, at the detriment of the traditional meals and sources and food sources that have lived the time. And so we are actually having a lot of our food being neglected, and yet these foods tend to be very diverse. Have good diversity, and they tend to improve our nutritional intake, and they are, for the most part, sustainable food sources, including legumes and fruits and edible roots, which has been passed down over time. But now we do know that we are having issues with that. Now, what I want to do with this page or with this slide was to indicate a working definition for this presentation. So indigenous foods, when I use the word indigenous foods or cultural foods or traditional foods, I'm actually saying about the same thing. To me, these are foods that have deep roots in the regions that they are used in. They form very critical parts of the community's cultural and social and economic fabric. They are typically grown and harvested and processed within the traditional methods that have been handed down over time. And these foods tend to be highly plant-based. Yes, there are some animal-based items, but they are mostly plant-based. And they tend to have unique adaptability for the local environment, because they are very climate sensitive. Now, and these foods have been with these indigenous communities for several generations. So these are the foods that over the years what I've tried to do in my research is to try and identify these foods and to promote them as much as I can. This slide is looking very busy, but the essence of this slide was to indicate what principles guide traditional foods. And I hope that at least these ones are clear enough. In the traditional setting, food is a center of culture, which is very critical. All culture look at food as a very critical part. And food in African traditional setting is more of whole foods rather than refined foods. And so in traditional African foods tend to be minimally processed foods. And that is something I want to highlight, because I'll come back to that in time. Then most traditional foods, I think in Africa, tend to promote seasonality. So you eat according to the foods available in the seasons, rather than what I would call the modern foods, which are convenience foods, which are preserved throughout the year. But then seasonality in eating ensures diversity, and then bioavailability of many different nutrients across the lifestyle. time. Then most traditional foods are typically wild and organic. Which is very, very important to highlight. They are wild, or they are produced in the wild, or they are harvested straight from nature, or they are organically grown without the artificial fertilizers and other chemicals. So those are some of the components of traditional, and they honor the food web system. So there is a clear attempt to try to preserve the ecosystem of the environment, rather than promote one item of food above the other. And that is something that we can look at in detail sometime later. But then whatever it is, there are a few other things which I may go about. Is food sovereignty. It actually encourages that, or sovereignty, depending on how you want to pronounce the word. But at the end of the day, the point here is that the traditional foods ensure that people own their food. They are the masters of their food. They grow their own food. They nature process and produce their own food, which they eat, and they can do that across the cycle, which is very important. Now, I think I'll just explain this slide, so I'll go on. So this man called Sean Sherman, who is one of the indigenous Indian chiefs, made a comment which I would like to share with you. He says that the most effective way to conquer a people is to attack their food systems. So if you want to do that, just burn their crops, destroy their food storage systems, destroy their meat, essentially, let their cattle graze on their ancient foods and destroy them. Because if you can control the food of a people, you can control the people themselves. And that is a basic war tactic. So that is what I want to highlight. I want you to keep this in mind as we have these conversations in the next few minutes. I'll end with this in mind. Keep this in mind. So the way to destroy a people or conquer them, ensure that you have control over their food system, or you destroy their own food systems and you have control over it. Because if you can control their food, you can control the people. And I think that is a fundamental conversation around how this issue about reclaiming food, traditional food system, foods have become very critical. Because then the one who has control over the food that is grown, that is produced, that is processed and stored, has control over the people who eat these foods eventually. And that brings up conversation about the genetically modified foods and other things. I would leave that. But for now, I want to highlight some of the benefits of indigenous foods. And the literature is full of many of such examples, and I will try to bring those in as much as I can. But essentially, indigenous foods are known to be very rich sources of vitamins, minerals, and other very important biocompounds that the body needs to grow. And several of these. This is a lot of examples in the literature to look at that. And then it's a very effective way of supporting the local systems and ensuring that the economic development of small-scale farmers and their families. Now, indigenous foods have been associated with in cultural identities of people, because many African communities tend to have their roles or their social roles and occupation around the food system. So there are people who are fishermen, who are farmers, and they're in different crops or other seasonal crops, and they do all these things along the food systems. And then, of course, after producing the food, there are other roles that are, or cultural identities that are associated with the food value chain, which several people have built their lives, their entire livelihoods around. And then the other benefit is that indigenous food systems are generally environmentally sustainable because they are focused on minimal waste, just going for what is necessary rather than the commercial benefits or the commercial interest. And then also to ensure that the environment is always preserved in the process, which is very, very important. Now, in these few slides, what I try to do is I'm going to try to show you some of the indigenous foods that I have been studying over time. I'm going to try to show how they are nutritionally beneficial, and then list them in groups. So here, some grains that are traditional to the African continent. Teff, which is mostly in Ethiopia, used for bread, the injera bread, sorghum, millet, fonio, and all that. So this is injera bread. It's a thin bread. It's very similar to pancake in the American context. And this is if you look at the nutritional information, it's a very good source of energy. I mean, because that's a good source of carbohydrate. Principally low sources of fats, almost no saturated fats, and the things that we will consider, I mean, unhealthy, the nutrients we will generally consider unhealthy. A very good source of dietary fiber and proteins, I mean, or plant-based proteins. So this is a very good meal that the Ethiopians have on a regular, which is also very useful. Is there a question, please? Okay. Right. Then sorghum is another very good grain that, I mean, it's easy to digest, is a very good source of protein, in fact, more protein than corn, which is a very popular grain as well. And sorghum in Ghana is used for porridges, and for other forms of meals, something we call TZ. But it's actually made into a boiled meal, which is also very, a good source of carbohydrates. Now, again, if you look at the nutritional composition of sodium, now, let me just make a disclaimer before I continue. Most of these nutritional compositions are also based on the formulations of recipes. But this is based on 100 grams of the material, and this is published in the literature. So I'm just trying to show these in the sense of, and these are averages. So when you are looking at nutrition information, you also keep in mind that there are also averages of several other things. But generally, you know that sorghum, I mean, these foods, I mean, or these things I'm talking about have been confirmed largely in the literature, and we can count on them to nourish our people. So sorghum is low in fat, which is plant-based foods are usually low in fat, and high in fiber, or very good source of dietary fiber, and also very good source of iron. And in Africa, where anemia or iron deficiency, anemia is a real issue, iron from sources such as these are also very relevant. And so this is very, very important. Now, linolenic acid is an essential fatty acid. How much technicality is allowed in this presentation? But otherwise, I'll just suffice to say that very essential, fatty acids, which are very important for maintaining skin, the integrity of our cells, are also available in sorghum. And if you look at the nutrition information, it really shows very good source of carbohydrates or energy, but low sources of the fats and other unhealthy and sodium, which is pretty much about quite low. And so if you look at it, that's a very good alternative for persons with cardiovascular diseases and diabetes in management. So here in Ghana, we use sorghum we recommend sorghum for such persons for treatment. This slide is looking quite busy, but millet is another food indigenous to Africa, and it's a very good source of the B vitamins, zinc, iron, selenium, copper, and they are, which are also very, very important. And so the point and the benefits of millets, I mean, it's pretty much like sorghum, is also pretty much like sorghum. But then the other extra benefits is that some studies associate it with thyroid hormone stabilization, which is very critical. So that ensures that, again, it helps with weight loss management. I mean, and then also to regulate sugar or blood sugar levels, invariably making it a relevant nutrient or food in the management of diabetes and related glucose sensitivities or yes. So again, the other grain here is fonio. Now this is also quite. Oops, is that how this is appearing? Okay, 1 minute. I think that the more. Okay, so again, fonio is pretty. So most of the grains really are very good sources of fiber. And fonio also has some proteins, but then we don't really consider these ones for the protein sources. We are looking at them mostly for the fiber and energy or the carbohydrate component. But then they're also very good sources of the B vitamins and these are an iron, as in Africa where we are, again, iron deficiency is very important. Iron, those are the key nutrients that we are finding these ones for. And so for resource poor settings, these are very, very healthy alternatives to the conventional or convenient foods that are available. These are another list of meals. I may not be able to go through all of them, but wheat, the bulgur wheat is also another very important option. It is associated with heart health, with sleep. I mean, helping people to sleep. Also associated with digestion and weight loss, and so has some benefits for the bones. And so here in Ghana, we actually actively promote the bulgur wheat. I hope I got it right, but that's how it's bulgur wheat consumption. It's also available in our markets now. In other places, couscous is another very indigenous traditional cuisine in the Eastern Africa and elsewhere. And couscous is 100 grams of couscous is about a standard serving of protein. And then again, it's quite low in the fats, which is associated with cholesterol and atherosclerosis and other things. But it's a very also good source of energy. So again, when we look at these foods, we are looking at how they are able to meet the nutritional needs of our people and still keep them away from the non-communicable disease, which is now on the rise in Africa as well. So this is another meal from Southern Africa, ugali and Kenya, thereabout, Eastern and Southern Africa. Ugali is made from cornmeal. It's more like a porridge, soft porridge, and this is pretty much, there are different names in different settings, but the composition is about the same. It's a cornmeal. And if you look at the nutritional facts, again, you are looking at a good source of energy, some healthy source of protein, and then the B vitamins, zinc, and iron, which is the focus because of our emphasis on micronutrient deficiencies in our setting. So again, these are meals we want to preserve, we have been looking at, and we are promoting to our people. Now, I would go on to the roots. There is cassava. Now, cassava is a very special kind of root. We recommend not more than a fist size per meal, but then it's a good source of carbohydrates, a good source of fiber, and some proteins. And that is, and again, those are the three macronutrients. So once we can get these, we know that we are looking at, we are having a significant contribution to the meals of our people. Now, a serving of cassava is giving us almost 330 calories, and that is quite significant for a meal. But cassava is usually not eaten by itself, even though some people will just boil and eat. It's usually prepared in Ghana, it's prepared into what we call fufu. It's pounded cassava and plantain, or sometimes cassava alone, or cassava and cocoyam, or cassava, but the general practice is the cassava and plantain. And our recent studies have shown that this is quite a good source of very, again, the same nutrients. We're looking at energy, we're looking at, yeah, there is no protein, yes, but then you look at carbohydrates, you look at pretty much some the total fats are quite low, carbohydrates is very moderate, and then we're also having quite a good source of fiber. Now, so this food is very much popular in Ghana, in Western Africa, particularly Ghana, Nigeria, and Sierra Leone. And so then in Ghana, we also have a special corn meal, which is a fermented corn dough, which is made from kenke. Forgive me, this picture is not too bright, but kenke is also made from corn, and that is also a meal that is an indigenous meal, usually served with hot sauce and other fried fishes or snails or shrimps or any other protein. And again, this is another very good source of fiber and carbohydrates and some proteins. Now, the other roots, it's potatoes and yams and sweet potatoes. Now, I would just keep that, but then again, these are indigenous African foods. And the reason why we are interested in them is because they're able to meet the macronutrient needs and also provide very good blend of micronutrients, which are very helpful for the micronutrient deficiencies that we have in our settings. Now, again, I'm going to skip that. So the other ones, like the leafy vegetables or leafy green vegetables, spinach, for example, is a very healthy, and most of the resources are coming from the micronutrients, which is here, and spinach is I think spinach is a very popular vegetable across the world, and it has not too much proteins, but magnesium is a very great source of magnesium, potassium, and iron, which is very important for, again, anemia and all that. So and kale is also quite popular in Africa. The benefits are numerous. I'm not sure I can list them all, but it's also a very highly touted anti-inflammatory vegetable. And so here we try to encourage as much of it as possible. Again, because it has very good sources of vitamin C, A, and K, which are all very important antioxidants, which is then, again, collard greens, more of the vegetables. So more of these vegetables, again, are very good. I think what I should say now is that many of these are we're looking at the fiber content, we're looking at the micronutrient content, and its contribution to our micronutrient deficiency, especially iron, folate, and B12. So again, bitter leaf is a very popular vegetable in Nigeria, especially. The benefits are numerous. It's also associated with gallstones, diabetes, and fever. especially when high temperatures. So again, these are indigenous things that our people have preserved over time. The preparations and recipes are different in different settlements, but then we do know that the benefits are getting more. In fact, this is a recent publication in this year, came out this year. I don't know if you can see it, but the definition of nutritional and phytochemical composition of 2 variants of bitter leaves, and the conclusion suggests that this is a very good. I don't know if you can see, but okay, I think my thing is frozen. Oops. Sorry, can you see my screen? I'm not sure what's happening. Hello?
Yes, we are seeing.
Okay, I'm not too sure what's happening to my screen.
We are seeing multiple slides.
Okay. Okay, good. So the point I'm making here is that there is not a lot of research happening in our foods, but recent publications are beginning, or recent research are beginning to show a lot more interest in our indigenous foods, and they are beginning to publish a number of these things and comparing them to themselves, the different variants, like here in bitter leaf. This is a Nigerian paper, comparing the differences and also giving us the compositions. And these compositions are useful to us because it helps us to understand how these foods can contribute to the overall health of the African or of our citizens. And so that is very important. So more research is happening. It's not enough, but it is going on, and we are using those things to impact change our interventions for our people. Now, their foods are quite a large and broad space, so I'm just making all of these is an attempt to show you the different variants of indigenous African foods that are available that people may be ignoring in their diet. Now, so here in the protein and poultry, I'm going to talk about a few. So soya, for example, is more or less like barbecue of different meats, goats, sheep, beef, and other ones that are just stuck on sticks. You find this in many West African countries, but in Nigeria, it is called suya. And what happens is that many of these are not accounted for in our dietary assessments or records, but these are very, very important sources of protein. And these are things you find, I'm sure, in many African people walking around, people carrying them on their headpans or having grills in different spots across the city, which are contributing significant portions of protein to the meals of Africans. And the essence of this is to highlight that this is a very good source of protein. What the nutrition information up here is the source. Unfortunately, I don't have, in fact, proteins generally, a serving of proteins generally provides about 7 grams of bioavailable protein. I mean, to the human body. But then what goes with these meats generally are a sauce, which is what they call soya spices. And these spices tend to be high in sodium, which may be the downside to this. But otherwise, the protein component of the soya is something that we are preserving. And these are things that African people have in their backyards. They know every African knows at least 1 or 2 people who grills meat on live fire, minimally processed and available, and or carries these grilled meats on their heads or in a box around the community to sell. And these are sources of protein that we want to highlight. Again, similar in East Africa, there's something they call nyama choma. It's about the same concept of meat chunks that they cut and grill and make available. Then in Western Africa, there is what we call mafi, and mafi is it's more like a meat in peanut butter sauce, and that the nutrition information provides about 14% of the protein requirements of a day. That's about 2,000 calories of a person per day. And it's a very good source of vitamin A. So
muvuga ndiko ndeba ukubise ku cyangwe ukaba usa neza umukobwa ukabura agiye.
Is that a question to me? I'm not.
Emmanuel,
sure.
Emmanuel, please
nanjye ndi
mute.
mu nama reka nirangira ndanjya guteka.
Emmanuel, please mute. Thank you. You can proceed, Dela. Sorry.
That's okay. I thought that was a question, so that I will need translation. But then the other very, very, very ignored component of the indigenous African diet is the edible insects. The last time I showed this picture to a group of people, an audience, the response I got, why would anybody eat worms and eat insects? But today in the Netherlands, there's a whole, industry of insects, research into insects and how we can use insects to augment the protein sources in the diet. But Africans have been doing this for centuries, have been eating different kinds of insects. And here, what I just did is a paper from Zimbabwe. So this is just a picture from a Zimbabwean paper, listing close to 10 different insects that the Zimbabwe people eat. And that is, some of these are also eaten in different other African countries. So we do have a set of edible insects that contribute significant proteins, amounts of protein to the diet of children and women especially, because in most of these communities in Africa, it will be very difficult to get a chunk of meat grilled or roasted and shared across the families. In some places, some children may never get a chance to actually hold a piece of meat as in food, maybe a piece of a part of beef, or because there is a cultural context that gives majority of the protein portions in the meal to the alpha male or the head of the house, which is usually a male, and as and when he decides to share to the rest of the family, that is fine. But that because of the cultural role of a male in the traditional setting. But then insects, especially after rain, the termites or the grasshoppers or the worms, when you harvest them, you can actually, we used to catch grasshoppers, and then you just take off the wings and the feet, and then you wash it nicely, and then fry it lightly, and that is in its own oil. There's some of the worms, and these are very minimally processed, and you have a very good source of protein. So this is examples of indigenous meals that are or protein sources that are getting lost on the African continent. Then there are those other fruits. I will just run through some of them. So the baobab fruit is also help. I'll say with good digestion. It's also known to boost our immune systems and build our immune responses, and also helps with sugar control in the blood, and help with the skin tone. but it's also getting missing with time. The mango, I mean, traditional African mango, very good source of potassium and vitamins, particularly the fat-soluble vitamins, A, E, and K, and then the B and C. But then it's also getting, yes, maybe it's available now, but we are replacing the traditional African mangoes with the biotechnologically, I mean, produced options, or which cannot, which seed cannot be used to produce the next batch of mangoes. And so now we are in a situation where you cannot harvest, you cannot buy a piece of mango, or you cannot take a mango and after eating it, hope to plant its seed to get a new set of, or to grow a mango tree, because then we are a lot of biotechnologically advanced or changed, or sometimes genetically modified versions, I mean, across the African continent. So changing our food systems, so we cannot sustainably grow our own food. And the same for papaya. Papaya is we all know that pawpaws are very healthy sources of the B vitamins and the minerals that we will call essential minerals. And they are, but again, they are modified. The pawpaws in the continent, at least in Ghana, have been genetically modified, and they are brighter than they used to be in color. They ripe sooner than you would expect, or they are forced to ripe. I mean, food adaptations and are all happening. So you cannot be too sure of the versions available. But then indigenous organic papaya is healthy. We want to continue to promote. And in Southern Africa, there's what they call the horned melon. And that's a picture. I'm not sure if you can see it clearly, but if you can, that's what it looks like. And this is also a very good source of several essential minerals, including zinc and vitamins, and which are things that the African tends to be, or the African several Africans living below the poverty line tend to lack in their meals, but they can get from readily available fruits in the environment. Then for dairy, well, we all know what the advantages of milk are. That is why we drink it in the first place. Calcium for our teeth, vitamin A for our skin, vitamin B12 for blood, and then vitamin D also for the skin and other cell processes. And we know that milk, I mean, there are different, there's a whey and casein ratio and all. But importantly, these milk is a very good source of nutrition for the human body. Now, the Fulani milk is the milk that comes directly from the Fulani cows. I mean, that's how it's called, but essentially they are all milk. Bottom line. Then the Maasai have a special milk they do that they add blood from an animal, a living animal too. Again, there are questions about food safety and food hygiene, but then again, I'm just highlighting that milk, I think that at least to the Maasai people, includes a mixture with some blood, which they share. But then essentially they are drinking milk. Their goal is to preserve the milk. Then there is camel's milk, which is not too popular in Western Africa, but in other Northern Africa, where the camels are mostly available, they are also highly available. And these are indigenous milks. Now, getting them directly from the camel and having them minimally processed and pasteurized is not a challenge. You may find camel's milk on the shelves, but then you can also expect that it to have different processing. Then there are the beverages, the original indigenous beverages. So palm wine is top on my list, and then this is the sap of the palm tree, and this is actually alcoholic in content. As it ages, per day, the alcohol content increases by about 1 to 2 units of alcohol. But this is the one. I mean, the sap of palm wine or the palm tree, which is used as a drink. In fact, in many Western African countries, palm wine is like a drink for marriage to officiate the required drink to officiate traditional marriages in Western African countries. I'm not sure about other African countries, but in Western Africa, Nigeria and Ghana in particular, palm wine is very critical, and it's a very good source of sucrose and fructose and other sugars. So it's sweetened. I mean, the sweet juice which is available and really helps. I mean, it's a good source of alternative to beverages, the sugar sweetened beverages. This paper is not too clear, so I'll just skip it. Then the other available beverages is the kakedi. That's the Egyptian name for it, or zobo or sobolo as the West African name for it. And this is a drink produced from the hibiscus subdariva plant. And this has been associated with very good sources of anthocyanins, which are very effective antioxidants, phenolic acids and organic acids, which are also very important to manage the digestive tract and the digestive system functions of the body. And it's a very good sort of quercetin or flavonoids, which are also antioxidants. And kade, I mean, is actually considered a drink of the pharaohs. They usually call it the drink of the pharaohs. And that's because, I mean, it's preserved. I mean, in ancient Egypt, it's considered the royal drink of the pharaohs. And so you needed to have royal permission to even drink it. But now it's available, I mean, in Africa, I mean, many parts of Western Africa on the streets. But that is a very indigenous beverage which has survived so far. And then there's the rooibos tea, which is often in Southern Africa. This is a paper that was published sometime in December last year in the Journal of Public Health Africa, and the health benefits of rooibos tea in humans. And I think that I recommend it for our reading, because this is another good source of anthocyanins or antioxidants, and it's very healthy. I mean, or at least it's indigenous to Africa, and it's a very good alternative to the convenience and sugar sweetened beverages. Then there's the marula fruit, which is here, which can be used to produce a juice, pretty much like palm wine. Can be used for jam, converted into a jam, and the fruits the nuts can be consumed, and then it also can be made into alcohol. And then this marula fruit is a very known source of vitamin C, and particularly in some antioxidant activities. So again, these are indigenous roots to our system that are able to produce juices that can be used in place of I'll permit you to mention brand names, the sugary beverages like Coke, Fanta, Sprite, and the others, Pepsi and others. This didn't come out too well. Now, overall, the nutritional value of these foods are 3, largely because they are very rich source of fiber, because of the minimal processing that is required for most of these traditional foods, and also that they are rich in antioxidants, which are very important, and other essential minerals and vitamins, which are important for our nutrition and our health overall, and also that they are also low in glycemic index. What I try to do on this slide is to compare the traditional foods with convenience foods, and the convenience foods tend to have higher levels of added sugars. They usually have higher unhealthy fats and saturated fats content, and they usually tend to have additives, artificial additives rather than natural additives, and they tend to increase the NCD or non-communicable disease rates like diabetes, hypertension, heart disease and obesity. And often these indigenous foods, I mean, they are either canned or frozen or cured or dried or freeze-dried, and they are available in stores and supermarkets all around us. Now, they are convenience foods because of just that convenience. I keep telling my clients, it's called convenience because it is convenient to use. But the idea of the convenience foods, in my perspective, is when you are unable to make the time to make your regular meals, then you can now use these ones as emergency or convenience so that you can still provide nutrition for your family. But it should not be the norm. It should rather be the exception. So when you are able to, when you are making your, you are able to make your meals and you can get into nature and harvest your food sources directly. I mentioned that several examples of these food options, but you come back, you preserve them, you prepare them, you make your meal. When you are unable to be forward for whatever reasons, then this will become alternatives or options you can use in the short term. But now the opposite is the case. We have these things all over the place in every street, every corner in Africa. You can find different forms of convenience foods available. If we find grains, I mean, in fact, the advertisement makes it even more beautiful, and so people tend to shun the often healthier options in nature for these convenience foods, and then that is bringing a lot of issues to us. Now, so we are now saddened with the issues of globalization and urbanization. So the more urbanized people are becoming, the less food we are producing by ourselves. And the more global the world is becoming, the more Africans are depending on foods produced from elsewhere in the world, outside of the African continent, outside of our settlements. And they are using these foods in our settings. So we're having we have a lack of documentation of indigenous food. So many of the foods are lost on us. We are not able to track them because then they are no longer in the immediate records of those who remember them. But then we are still grappling with undernutrition and overnutrition, because then the more we are depending on convenience foods, the more we are building appetites for foods that tend to be associated with non-communicable obesity and diabetes and heart diseases. And then yet there are still more people who are hungry and not having enough food to eat. And so we have these challenges. And now, on this slide, I want to just talk about food sovereignty. Now, the local people are, in this picture, the local people are producing the food, but then we have military people who are now, or state actors who are basically guarding and protecting the industrialists to harvest our food systems and produce foods, or if you like, products that will come back to the local people to eat. And by the time they are done, there will be nothing left for the local people to own, because of the power play. So the indigenous people are losing on a very fast rate their power over the food systems that they have lived with all these years, at the detriment of the indigenous or the commercial businesses or commercial interests. And this is even powered by the state in some cases. And that is a real problem for our people, because we are losing biodiversity in the process. We are losing, and the civilians are losing the power to control their own foods. And that, for me, is a conversation that we must have, and must have more seriously. And there are groups in Ghana and elsewhere that are trying to promote these conversations, but I think that there is still a lot to do, because there are several opportunities to promote our indigenous foods in food festivals, so people can get to learn the foods that are available. And then in today's world with social media, we want to encourage more social media engagement, more social media campaigns. And I'm hoping that community-based initiatives to preserve our foods and to promote them are also happening across Africa, so that we can preserve them and make the world know what it is that African foods are and cuisines are. And then at some point, the governmental support or policy support becomes unavoidable, because we need to be conscious of preserving and revitalizing the indigenous foods and keeping them running. I want to use this video to conclude, and it's a very short story. I hope you can hear it.
Hello, Dela. The sound is off. We can't hear.
You can't hear the sound. Oh, my dear.
It needs to be set up to do that. And unfortunately, I don't have the skills. There's a special setting for running a video with clear sound. And I am not prepared to do that. Let me just see, give me a moment and see if I can.
Are you on mute? Okay, I think it should work now.
A rich industrialist from the north was
beautiful.
a rich industrialist from the north.
Can you hear it, please? Can anyone hear the audio now?
A rich industrialist from the
Yes, we
north
can.
was horrified to find a southern fisherman just lying leisurely on his boat. "Why aren't you fishing?" asked the industrialist. "Because I have caught enough fish for the day." "Why don't you catch some more?" "What would I do with them?" "You could earn more money. With that, you could fix the motor of your boat, go into deeper waters and catch more fish. Then you would make enough money to buy nylon nets. These could bring you more fish and more money. Soon you would have enough money to buy 2 boats, maybe even a fleet of boats, and then you would be a rich man like me." "What would I do then?" "Then you could really enjoy life." "Sir, what do you think I'm doing now?" said the fisherman. A rich industrialist from the north.
I don't know if you heard the
Yes,
audio.
we really did. It was
Thank you.
delightful. It's wonderful.
It is.
For me, this is the beauty of the conversation. The industrialist is looking at the industrial, the margin, the profits, the interests, and the tradition, and the fisherman is like, I mean, I've gotten what I need. I'm enjoying myself now. Unfortunately, the conversations we are having is that the industrial interest has overridden the fisherman's interest in this case, where the fisherman, being the traditional people, the traditional communities, foods, has had to give way to the industrial needs or industrial wishes, and then we've allowed that to become the norm rather than the exception, to the point where we are now living in a world which is looking at how to make profit of every food conversation, every situation, to the point that we are failing to see that from the get-go, the traditional communities have been resting all the while. They've been doing just what the industrialist is seeking to do in the future. And so it is time for us to go back to our roots, go back to our foundations, our culture, our basis, and reignite the very things we were doing before. That sometimes science, we have used science to demonize some of the things that we have always done, or our forefathers have done, and lived much longer than with. I mean, again, we have no data to back that, but we know by anecdotes that several African homes have people who have lived beyond 90 and 100 and sometimes 120 with just the same cultural, traditional actions that we have bastardized in the last 40 to 50 years. But now we are going back to the very self-same things. And then we are saying that, oh, what we said was wrong before, now it is right. So let's go back and change them. In fact, for those of you in the US, the national guidelines for Americans, dietary guidelines for Americans, have changed in the last 20 years or so. We used to bastardize cholesterol, but now we are saying, no, cholesterol is important in the cell and hormone development. We cannot say that it is bad because the dietary cholesterol does not create problems for our health. So the point I'm making is that the fisherman was doing the right thing from the beginning. And thank God he was able to know that he was doing the right thing from the beginning. But now over time, we have not kept to our right things from the beginning. And so things have changed, and our current generation are losing in a very quick rate the things that our forefathers had been getting right from the beginning. It is time for us to go back there and to ensure that we are eating the very same foods that our culture and tradition has used to sustain themselves over time. And that's what my mission is in this presentation, to help us know that there are a lot of these foods. In fact, what I've presented here is just a fraction of what's available. Let's take note of that and see what we can do to promote much of it. So my recommendations are very simple. We have to necessarily encourage policy change, necessarily support the local food systems to preserve and grow and nurture these foods so that we can continue to sustainably feed our people, and to promote this in our educational system as well as invest in more research to make it possible. There's a long call to action, but essentially the bottom line is that we need to reclaim our indigenous foods. We need to ensure that we preserve our heritage and to use that to our benefit from now and to the future. Thank you very much. This is further videos for us to look in the future. Thank you for your time and attention. Over.
Wow. Thank you so much, Dela. It has been a very rich presentation from you about nutrition and a lot about other things. Yeah, previously we had planned to have breakout rooms, but these numbers are just okay. We can go into an open session whereby colleagues can share ideas, they can pose questions as we have a direct interaction with our presenter. Thanks so much, Dela. That was really very rich. We really appreciate the effort and the knowledge that you've shared with us this evening. Back to you, members.
Robert, let me just say that Getri was supposed to be facilitating at this point, but I believe she has been disconnected and I'm unable to reach her. If you could please continue for the group and lead us. And as it turns out, at the next end of this half hour, at what is 9:30 my time, but whatever the half hour is for each of you, Robert and I will have to leave because we actually have another meeting coming up. But if Robert, you can just guide the discussion meanwhile, that would be wonderful.
Thank you, Nancy. Colleagues, any questions for our presenter tonight? Emily, Leo Mascot, I'm glad to see you. I'm in a dark space, power's gone, so I can't do a video. But I'm sure you've listened, you've learned, you've heard. What contributions are we having to this discussion? Herman, Emmanuel, and others, please. The floor is open. Yes, Scott, Leoma.
I'm curious whether there are any beans. You didn't seem to mention beans much when you were mentioning the traditional food, and I was just curious if they are traditional in Africa.
Yes, they are. I mentioned legumes. I guess I didn't mention them in specifics, but yes, there are beans, there are cowpeas, there are black-eyed peas, and very indigenous. And another one is bambara beans, which is quite indigenous with African settlement. Yes, there are.
Because I know that corn, when it was grown indigenously in the Americas, was coupled with beans and squash. So I'm wondering about not only the foods that are indigenous, but the indigenous ways of growing them. Is
Yes.
that also at risk?
Certainly. That's also very much at risk. The indigenous agricultural processes. And I did mention that we are in a battle against the modern agricultural farming techniques, which is actually overriding the indigenous ways of growing and nurturing these foods. And so yes, they are also at risk. Maybe in a future presentation, I will come in and speak in more detail about some of the ways that our people have always grown food in our settings.
Before I pass it on to the next person, just say I really appreciate the perspective you have and the importance of what you're bringing forth. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Leoma. Emily had her hand up. Then we shall go to Maggie, I think. Emily,
Hi.
can you come in next? Hello? Yes,
Yeah.
Maggie.
Hi. Yeah, thank you for this. It's very interesting. I've been interested in this forever, and it's wonderful what you're doing. What I'm wondering about is, do they talk about combining the proteins so they get complete proteins with these different foods?
Yes, certainly. So here we what we do is to ensure that we combine the animal source proteins with the plant source proteins. And so yes, we do know, and that's what the science tells us, that the animal source proteins are much more bioavailable than the plant source proteins. And so yes, we ensure that we encourage indigenous people to combine them in such a way that they can have the bioavailability improved. And for example, even for plant proteins, for vegetarians or vegans, using vitamin C, for example, or which is another source of like in the citrus fruits, oranges and pineapples and others, can also help make the non-heme protein much more bioavailable. So yes, we teach our people to do just that. Yes.
And then I have a further question. Do they consider combining the different proteins like they do beans and rice in some of the other South American countries that will provide a complete protein, whereas alone they don't?
Yes. So in Ghana and other, particularly in Western African countries, yes, we actually have a full meal we call wachi. That's how it's popularly called. But it's actually a mixture of rice and beans. And you have and it's a one pot dish that has the some fraction of rice and some beans, and then you have that in a meal. So yes, that is something we promote as well. Again, all of this is to make sure that the meal is complete and has enough a good mix of the improve the bioavailability of the basic nutrients that the people will need. So yes, that is something that we also promote actively here in Africa through this meal.
Thank you. Thank you. And then one more question, if nobody else has a question. How are you getting this out to people? Just curious how that works for you.
Well, through advocacy, through meetings like this, and presentations like this, I also teach in the university, so I try to share these lessons with my students and with my patients and clients as much as we can. We are also working on getting some of these published in the scientific literature and sharing them on social media and websites. But then that is still work in progress. But then most of the time it is through advocacy and presentations like these. Yeah. Now the aim is to ensure that the world gets to understand that these foods are available, number one, and two, we are losing them quickly, but we also help to preserve them for the future generations, which are almost not aware of some of these foods and what they can do for us.
Thank you, Dela. Emily had something to say. Thank you for the questions, Maggie and Leoma. We appreciate.
It's
Yes,
a
Emily.
comment, and I'm willing to stand aside if people have questions.
It's okay, comment.
I think when I introduced myself, I said I had attended the World Plenary of the Friends World Committee for Consultation, which happened in South Africa. And one of the concepts I came away with was the need to move away from the shadow of colonialism. And that certainly fits in with what you shared about that comment from the Native American. That the present food system and is promoted by some people who have a good heart, like Bill Gates, but it's still it's a form, a continuing form of colonialism. So that's what I have to say. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Emily. Members, any more questions? We are left with 7 minutes only. We've not heard from, yes, Ray, happy to see you.
Yes, thank you, Robert. I have a question of Della. When we have marketing, this includes not only convenience foods, but also produce, at least in America, we oftentimes use preservatives to extend the shelf life of the food, so that instead of it only being, say, our produce only being available and fresh enough for a couple of days, it appears to be fresh for a couple of weeks or more. And so my question is, are you aware of studies showing whether or not the use of these preservatives, which are basically toxins to kill the bacteria or to kill mold, etc., whether they do damage to the biomes of our own bodies when we ingest these preservatives along with the food that they were ostensibly used to maintain longer shelf lives? Do you have any comment on that problem or that issue?
Thank you, Ray. Yes, Della, are you with us?
He's on mute.
You're
Hello,
on
can
mute.
you hear me?
Yeah, now we can.
Okay, so
Yes, Della, we can't hear. Hello.
And whether or not I'm aware of research which suggests how these affect the body. Am I correct?
I
Was the
also
question-
have an additional question, but I don't want to cut off your answer to that if you have more.
Some of the others, because we're running out of time, and Herman, I think.
Oh, okay.
He took his audio off something all night.
Yes, please.
Okay, but
Wait,
I want to
wait,
defer to
wait.
anybody else who want to have a question first
wait.
before doing a second question.
Herman, did you have a question?
Herman, glad to see you. If you have a question, Emmanuel, if you have a question, could you pause before Ray poses the second question? We are left with 4 minutes, colleagues. Yes, Ray, pose the question so that we plan on summarizing. Yes, Herman, you are unmuted.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for this great presentation. It is really very important also to share with us the presentation. In 3 minutes, we cannot discuss a lot about this great matter.
Herman, excuse me, Herman and Robert, I think we can go for almost another, maybe 8 minutes at least, maybe a bit more. I'll arrange it with the other meetings so we can do a little more right now.
Okay. Yeah, surely. Herman, pose the question. We can have more extra 10 minutes to allow us dig deep in your issue. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. The issue is that what we are seeing about food now in our villages, in our country here, is that people are really living the indigenous food. What was very important for our health and doesn't have any issue with pesticides and other drugs. And the issue is that how we can really get back to our roots, because we are trying to copy what people are eating in USA, in Europe, somewhere else, when we are living in Africa. And this is what is happening if you just go in the streets, in the markets here. Most of people are considering that eating indigenous food is like a shame. All people want to eat food from abroad. What is causing many diseases and many health problems? I think we will need to talk more about this and get many solutions, get many information to share between us. Thank you so much.
Robert, I have been able to reach our other meeting members, and we can go until a quarter of the hour, 9:45 a.m. for me, a quarter of the hour for wherever else you are. So we have about another 25 minutes right now.
Thank you, Nancy. Yes, Della, can you please respond to that before we have Emmanuel come in?
Yes, I think the comments, for me it was a comment, and it's just to say that our people Africans are copying the West, and we are copying somewhat very blindly, and seeking to and forgetting our traditional ways. And I think that's the crux of my conversation. My presentation was to say that our traditional African foods and cuisines are being lost on a daily basis because the new generation is actively seeking to be like the West, and rather than be like their older generation, or learning from the older generation. And that is partly also because of colonization. I think it was Emily, or is it Emily? Sorry, I missed the name, who made a comment about this is more of the food systems today is more of a colonization, following another form of colonization, and that is the point. The point is that we are losing ourselves and our culture and our way to modernization and urbanization, and we need to actively preserve what we have left of it. That is the point of my presentation. If we don't preserve it, we cannot share with the coming generation or this generation and the next. If we fail to preserve it now, this generation may not even get to see the foods that their grandfathers or grandmothers ate or grew or cultivated and so they would not be able to pass that information on to the next generation.
Thank you so much, Dela. Emmanuel's hand was up. Are you convinced, Herman, about the response?
Yes, thank you so much. Actually, I want just to start by say thank you to Adele for the presentation. It was amazing. And I think just like on this platform, we are really raising some of the serious issues we are facing here on this continent. For me, I'm in Rwanda, and even just like before, maybe like this trending of new way of eating, like having like a new recipes on our table. For us, we already have actually few dishes because of just like when just like the colonizers came in, you know, just like they said, just like our food was not tasting good, especially more of the vegetables. So they promoted some just of the type of the food we are eating today. But even those also just, I think also there is really more of the change that is happening. But for me, what scares me most, it's like the education, about the education, how just the people are informed about this. You would just like see in the elite people, maybe just like those educated people, they are eating more of just like those foreign food, if I were to say. And then the younger people who are growing up, they want just like to be like those people, you know, because that's what they see on the TV, on commercial. That's what just like it is being advertised on social media. That's what also they are seeing. Like the faster food is trending, and maybe they think that is more of the healthy food. So in the mind, the young people are growing with this intention. You know, if just I grow up, I will eat this type of food, and then I would say also what is happening. I would say like in Rwanda, 70% of the population depend on farming. And now the government is pushing for conventional agriculture, more of mechanization, a lot of inputs into farming. For me, I'm just like asking the question, like maybe on other people in this space, maybe in your country, how do you gonna maybe tackle that problem? If it is also from the top down, they are promoting this new way of lifestyle. How do you challenge then the system? You know, because sometimes maybe I would say like the government is saying they want just to have more of production so that it can meet the needs, you know, of the food needed by the population. But the way of achieving that, it is more, you know, problematic because there is a lot of pesticides used, there is a lot of fertilizers is used, there is like the new practices like the local people don't understand, and then there is also this new trend of new way of eating. So for me, I see it is a very big issue. I want just like to hear from your perspective. What is your recommendation in your also countries? If you have like your governments are all implement, I mean, pushing these policies that are pushing us actually more backwards. How do you, what are you doing? How do you do it? How do you deal with it? Especially from the presenter, because I have noticed maybe you are doing the work about this. What are you doing? Another question, maybe we'll also go with this. It's about losing our indigenous seeds. Like more of the seeds now we are planting today is more of genetically modified, You can't plant them today and you plant them tomorrow. You have to go to the market to buy the new seeds. But before, we used to have amazing seeds. Maybe they were not giving more of the tons of the production, but they were very resistant to the weather, very resistant to new, predators, whatever. I don't know, just like how I can call it. But like more of those things that, harm them, they were very resistant. But today, you can't go in any village and find those seeds. So as Africans, how are we even conserving our indigenous seeds from not being modified, if I were to say? So for me, I have a lot of questions, and I really understand like the importance of this space, but then how do we move forward? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Emmanuel, for that interesting question. Yes, Della, back to you.
Yes, those are really, really important questions. I guess that I didn't get the chance to speak about these today. We are losing our seeds. And indeed, I mentioned, as part of my presentation, that genetically modified seeds or where when you plant them in one season, you cannot be sure of using the seed for the next season. You have to go back and buy the new seed. On the producers of the genetically modified or the seeds, or if you like the scientifically modified seed banks, indigenous seed banks. In fact, in some countries now in Africa, I know it's almost becoming a crime. For example, in Zimbabwe. You soil in your own farms. Otherwise, when the state authorities find that you have farms that you have planted seeds which are not approved by them or by the state, or you didn't get, don't have a certificate of for your seeds, you can actually have your farm destroyed, because then they don't consider those seeds safe for the country, and that's something that is gradually eating into the African settlement and our state, because then these seeds are more of economic. They have economic motivations rather than agricultural motivations or food security motivations. Because then, again, it's the same mindset of the industrialists, of the colonialists, of forgive my choice of word, but if you like, the profit-minded interest. So you are having a point where we will have to consciously preserve our own seeds, create seed banks, keep our seeds, keep them for the future, and ensure that they continue to remain viable. But the viability of seeds is not just its ability to germinate and grow. You also have to have the right conditions to make the seeds thrive in the soil. And most of our soils, with the farming practices that we have adopted, you will need to have more inputs, inorganic inputs to the soil. And that only complicates the food production system in Africa. That's the more reason why we need to, as a matter of urgency, continue to have these conversations and find ways to keep our own indigenous foods, particularly the seeds, so that we can produce our own food, and also ensure that we can preserve these foods and preserve the nutrition that comes with it. And otherwise, we wake up one day and we realize that we don't really have any food that is indigenously African. And even if it is African, even if we have some roots, we may not be able to produce it by ourselves. We will have to depend on somebody else to provide us the seed to produce it for us to not have our meals. And that, like I said, if you want to control people, control their food systems. And that is the whole conversation. It's a political and economic conversation. And so Africans need to wake up to that reality that, look, we are at a crossroads where we cannot continue to depend on the colonialists and the people of the West for to nurture our food system or to grow our own food system. We need to, number one, save the seeds, save the ones that are currently available. Number two, create a bank, keep them, and ensure that they are always available to use for the next planting season. Number three, stop, if we can, the use of non-African germinated or African produced or certified seeds. The food should be made here the seeds should be preserved and produced here in Africa for Africa and not elsewhere for our soils. Because nobody really has our best interest at heart. Unfortunately, that's the truth. Self-preservation is the first rule of survival. If we fail to do it by ourselves for ourselves, we should not expect anybody else to do it for us. And for me, that is what I would say to your comments. Over.
Thank you so much, Della. Those were very insightful comments and responses. I love the progress of this discussion. And we have a hand in Nancy, before we go to Maggie, because Nancy has not yet asked a question. Yes, Nancy, then we shall have Maggie come in.
Actually, Robert, I would like to do two things. I would like for Maggie to be able to speak again, and then Ray would like to speak. And then, if I may, I will do kind of the summary and the close of our meeting with you having the last word, because you also have not yet spoken. So maybe we can go Maggie, Ray, Nancy, and end with Robert and your comments and insights and end our meeting in about 10 minutes.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Maggie, there you go.
You're muted, Maggie. You're muted, dear.
Thank you. Dela, thank you. I thought what you said was just profound and right on. And I hope that in your country you can seize the day with this and get moving forward before the corporate octopuses come in and start putting their tentacles everywhere. Here, we have people like Bill Gates, for one, don't have specifics, but I know he has bought up just huge swaths of land here. And also in Ukraine, BlackRock has bought up huge swaths, particularly of the agricultural wheat growing land. And I'm just noting this, and I also know, which is kind of tangential, but also in many parts of the planet, many of the swaths of forests are being bought up by corporations. And so I don't have an answer. I just wanted to point that out. I think that I think we need to address it because it's really critical. Check.
Thank you, Maggie. Yes, Ray?
wanted to wait until Percy had a chance to respond to Maggie if he wished to.
Okay. Yes, Percy. Kindly attend to Maggie's concerns, then we proceed to Ray. Della, you're on mute.
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Hello?
we can. Yes, please, continue.
The network is fluctuating here. But I just wanted to agree with Maggie. Forgive me, but I missed portions of what she said. Is it possible for you to summarize for me? But I only heard the ending part. The network is.
Can you
Oh,
hear me
wait.
now? Can you hear me
Yes, I
now?
can hear you now. Yes, I can.
So just to the brief 40,000 foot is that, like, I know that, like, in many places, including, for example, in Ukraine, BlackRock has bought up in enormous amounts of the wheat growing land, and it's happening all over the planet. And A, I wish you well, and B, I'm wondering if you have a plan on how big the corporations have already established themselves where you live.
So the corporations it's not just in many of the industrial countries are actually doing that. In Ghana, for example, China has already bought several hectares of land up north. And I was just telling Nancy, was it recently, that for me that is export. They produce the foods here and export that back to China, and then they bring us they export the finished products to us. So they use the organic foods in the Chinese system and bring to us the conveniently produced, the industrially produced foods to, I mean, to flood our market. And so it's not just that the other countries doing much similar, buying significant portions of Africa, lands in Africa, to ensure that they can continue to perpetuate the industrialist concept, the colonialist concept. Now, then, for me, what we need to do, there's a political dimension to this, to say that, look, we have had enough of this. We want to ensure that our people can feed ourselves. And so we are making that discrimination. You cannot use our lands for A, B, C, and D. But that may not happen because the many governments in Africa are indebted to the World Bank and the West in various ways, very huge amounts. And so he who pays the piper and plays, choosing the tune, I guess. But what we need to do is to make that conscious determination. And that's what advocacy, that's what I'm doing with my work, to try and highlight the issues, advocate the issues, and ensure that we can get many more people to understand the realities that we are working with and to make response to them. Over.
Thank you, Dela. Yes, Ray?
The concerns that were so well expressed by both Herman and Emmanuel are unfortunately also illustrated in the experience of the Chinese peasants and were documented in a very important study I want to briefly share. The scholar and agricultural economist Yashao, well, let me just say, China went through a very difficult period of time known as the Cultural Revolution. And after they emerged from the Cultural Revolution, the real income of the Chinese peasant increased by 7%. So Yashao decided to study as her doctoral thesis what, if anything, the Chinese peasants did as a class with that extra 7% real income that they had as a benefit, economic benefit, after the emergence from the Cultural Revolution. Unfortunately, what they primarily did with that newfound wealth, or at least mitigation from poverty, was to invest in junk foods from the urban areas. They went from a healthy rural diet to a novel and more fascinating diet to them. It was a treat to be able to escape the boredom of their healthy diet and to use this extra income to purchase convenience foods, or probably even more junk foods that were giving them salty food and sugary foods, etc., from the urban areas of China. She did not go into the health effects of this, but unfortunately, the experience of the Chinese peasant in the late 20th century was to use their newfound wealth to invest in poorer nutrition.
I'm going to follow on right away because we are absolutely out of time. I believe we need a deeper conversation together. And EVN, we will work together to have a follow-up conversation about what can be done about these things and what is being done. Our program next month will focus on a key element of the solutions. I also want to mention to all of you, we can send this out via Campesina, an organization of 200 million farmers, fishermen, local farmers, small farmers. I will say that the research that if small scale farming is done well, and that's what we'll be talking about next time, it is far more productive than the agribusiness. And the agribusiness kills the soil. It uses it up, and in a few years you cannot grow anything on it. And this approach turns around and heals the soil and heals the human beings and reclaims food sovereignty. So I would love for us to pick up on everything you have said today and everyone else has, and build on that as a major theme for what Equatorial Voices Network, which in turn we focus on then. How do we educate? How do each of you educate your own people? What are you doing to make that happen? And we can share our projects and our efforts to make it happen and take a stern look, serious look at the political and economic barriers to that and ways that we can work together across our different regions to address those larger forces. Thank you so very much for your leadership in this today, Percy. It was wonderful hearing all that you had to say. I feel so well informed now. Robert, over to you to wrap us up. We've got 3 minutes.
Okay, my sincere appreciation to each one of you who have sacrificed your time, listened, asked insightful questions, and commented to Dela's presentation. My appreciation to Nancy, who managed to bring in Dela. A few weeks ago or month, we didn't know anything about him. I really appreciate that gesture, Nancy. At least it is moving us to another level. That's why EVN is open to the world. And also, such things all relate to what we stand for as EVN. Lastly, I want to comment that I'm just amazed. I'm just moved by the rich and wealth of information Dela has shared. This is one of the most informative presentations I've been to, whereby it is tackling something that affects us all, not only about agriculture, but even health, nutrition of people. This is an important piece of work. Thank you so much, Dela. And surely, just as Nas has commented, I think we need more of this discussion, and in the near future, we shall plan it. And the world needs to be aware of where we are going. Those questions and concerns raised by Scott and others scare us all. The same applies here. The indigenous seeds are running out. You can't get original maize now. The taste of maize has changed. It is no longer the original, sweet, delicious maize that we're having, because we are about numbers rather than quality and the nutrients that are into the crops that we are rearing. We are cultivating, sorry. So thank you so much, Dela. Thank you, everyone. My warm appreciation to everyone. Let's look at building onto this. And a reminder to us all, next month, at the end of it, the last Friday, we shall have another presentation from Palmer Garden Foundation. Thank you, everyone. Over to you, Dela, for your final remarks as we proceed. Thank you.
Yes, so my last few words will be to say thank you for the audience and for the opportunity. I have the tendency to say a lot of things and get carried away, but I'm hopeful that I was able to put across at least two important things: that the food systems is warped, and we need to begin to think around it and preserve the indigenous foods so that it can serve Africa better. Those for me are the two key things. The current food system has issues, issues that is actually leading to people losing more of our indigenous knowledge and indigenous foods. And if we're able to preserve our indigenous foods, we may be in a better place to feed our people without a lot of concern. But otherwise, I want to appreciate Nancy and the EVN team for inviting me and for hosting me. And I want to thank you all for the audience. You've been a wonderful audience. God bless you.
Before we
Bye-bye.
close, I want to note Emil Underberg, who is not going to have a chance to speak today, but I'm going to work with him to be part of our next conversation. He is a global leader in solving these problems that we have been dealing with. Welcome, Emil. And I look forward because you have so many answers to share with us. And unfortunately, we have another meeting starting on this channel momentarily, but next time you are a global leader in agroforestry and have wonderful stories to tell of what is going on in Europe and around the world under your leadership. So welcome for today. I regret that you didn't have a chance to participate more.
Well,
and,
I listened to the conversation. I was part of it. I didn't have the camera on.
I'm so glad you were here. Thank you. Okay, everyone, bless you all. And I'm going to end it right now and hope to see you the next time we can continue this conversation.